intro.
Happy Tuesday, everybody. Welcome to another day in the arena. This is Poor Mana's Magic. Today, we're going to be taking a look at the meta. So normally we would do this on Mondays, but yesterday I couldn't resist climbing the ladder a little bit more, and I'm glad I did, because I noticed that something was different. Mono Red was not taking up the lion's share of the meta anymore. In fact, I was running into a lot of variations on Esper colors, and that's reflected in the meta numbers. So last week, Mono Red was sitting at a whopping 20% of the meta. This week, it's down to 13.5. Last week, Esper Legends, kind of the most common deck of the white, blue, and black variety, was sitting at roughly 17 to 18%, and that is down to 12.7. Now, it hasn't gone away. It hasn't disappeared. It's just splintered into 5 different variations on those colors, including Azorius Control, Orzhov Control, Dimir Midrange, and a mid-range and also control version of Esper Legends. Now, what does this mean for the meta? Well, it means that we are seeing a lot of the same cards. So if we flip over to the top cards and top creatures, we can make some very easy observations here. In terms of the top cards overall, we are seeing a lot of control inclusions. We see Disdainful Stroke in the number 1 slot. We see removal in the form of Go for the Throat and Cut Down in the 2 and 3. And then all the rest of them kind of make sense. They are excellent cards like Sheoldred the Apocalypse, the top creature for who knows how long now, Wedding Announcement, and, surprisingly, Lauren of the Third Path. When we go over to the creatures, we can make a few other descriptive observations. We can notice they are all legendary, they are all creatures, they have some form of tax or protection, and what these colors really like to do, what Esper seems really good at right now, is playing out 1 and 2 mana spells to kind of match and go toe-to-toe with some of the aggro decks, and this comes in the form of Skrelv and Rona. And then they start building on that. Skrelv comes down, protects maybe a 2-mana Thalia, which protects their, turn 3 Brutal Cathar, or an Adeline, or the Rafine. And while you're trying to get rid of those to attack your way through or remove your way through the Skrelvs and the Thalias, they're putting things on the board like Sheoldred. They are countering your spells with Urtai. They are taking over, building a board, and providing themselves a lot of value to stay ahead. So, how are we, a lowly commons and uncommons deck, supposed to overcome such a huge and intimidating meta like this? Well, there might in fact be a couple different paths we can take. Now, if we look at the top removal spells, we notice Go for the Throat. So, a lot of releases will have this 1 black, 1 colorless mana cost removal spell, but it is conditional. It can only hit certain creatures. When you think about something like Cast Down, which is non-legendary, Go for the Throat can only hit non-artifact creatures, which means maybe there are some artifact creatures that we could include or emphasize in our deck. It could really help us in the early turns. Now, this is a little bit questionable because these same decks are playing Cut Down, which means on a 1 or 2 turn basis, if our creatures have power and toughness 5 or less total, they're going to be targeted by this, and that's going to make it difficult. Now, if we go back into the actual Esper Legends deck, we can take a look at what we can expect in terms of this removal. Now, Esper Legends seems like it's actually playing significantly less of the cut downs. They're going for the Go for the Throats, and then they're including Igonjo as some kind of secondary removal. And they're relying a lot more on their Make Disappears. Make sure that those turn 2, turn 3 plays, maybe a Calyx or Feldon, aren't hitting the board on time. So if there aren't as many cut downs in the meta right now, maybe we can get away with some of these 1 or 2 mana artifacts, especially our artifact flyers. So going back to the creature base though, we know that these are all legendary. We know that they tend to work in concert. A turn 1 Skrelv into a turn 2 Thalia into a turn 3 Rafine, etc. our removal is going to be less effective against such an efficient rollout. So that might mean we want to completely disregard going for any sort of removal and only go with cards that are purely our strategy, a go face, burn to the face strategy. So that could be one option. Another option would be to bring in some kind of removal that can target these high toughness creatures. A lot of our removal is burn based, is damage based, and at most we can do 4 damage with our Convoke spell. That's not going to hit a Shieldred. It's going to have a very hard time hitting a Rafine. It's going to have a hard time taking care of an Adeline. However, if we play some dedicated removal, maybe a 1 mana and 1 white spell that can target toughness 4 or more, or gives our opponents a clue token, maybe this would take care of some of these finishers from the Esper decks, the kinds of plays that come down on turn 3, turn 4, log our board and allow them to pull ahead. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and move over to our Arena deck. So when it comes to the deck we've been playing, our Boros Aggro deck, we have had in the 1 slot some Swooping Lookouts, some Kumanos, some Monastery Swiftspears, Phoenix Chicks, and our Play with Fires. In our 2 slot, we've been running Fateful Absence, again, to try to give ourselves a chance to deal with those high toughness creatures. We've also been playing some combat tricks in Antagonize and Blazing Crescendo, which also allows us to exile the top card of our library, and then also playing some Go Face with Lightning Strike. And then we kind of reach our top end pretty quickly. We have Sunrise Cavaliers, a 3/3 Trampley Haster. We have Stoke the Flames, which are early creatures can help pay the cost for via Convoke. Now this has been working pretty well. Before this week, we were running at about a 55% win rate. That means that we were able to climb the ladder fairly efficiently and get to Platinum 4. This week, however, we've been running at about a 50% or less win rate as we're seeing more life gain, as we're seeing more of this mid-range. And mid-range is going to eat our lunch all the time. However, because we are in the common and uncommon, we kind of have to default to what the cards give us. There are going to be less options to choose from. There are going to be lower powered options to choose from, and we really have to either go fast or commit to a kind of pure strategy. So, what can we try to change about this deck that might set us up a little bit better against those go for the throats, a little bit better against those big toughness, taxing, protecting legendary creatures? Well, there are 2 interesting options here that I can see. The first is to specifically tool for the go for the throats, which means adding more artifact creatures. Now, we have noticed how effective Swooping Lookout can be. This is really good with its vigilance, because if a Wandering Emperor is trying to come down on a turn 4, it can't hit this. Wandering Emperor requires a creature to be tapped before it can be exiled. So putting down a Swooping Lookout, having it be vigilant, having it never turn sideways, is a really effective way to kind of stave that off and make it difficult for our opponents to figure out what to do with it. Now, we've only been playing 2 of these, but we have noticed that they are super effective. Flying, obviously, is a great evasion. A lot of creatures, with the exception of a Rafine, are going to have a hard time blocking this. And if we can pump it up with a Blazing Crescendo or an Antagonize, all of a sudden, opponent's on a fast clock. And if we're at, if they're at 4, maybe 6 health, we can win the game out of nowhere. Now, we had been including Seismic Wave as well. This was mostly tooled to mono red, a little bit to mono green, and some of the token decks, but we've kind of seen this become less effective as a creature-based Esper has grown into prominence. So we're going to go ahead, and the first move we're going to make is going to be to cut the Seismic Waves. We know Swooping Lookout has been good. We're going to add a couple of those back. And now that we are kind of improving our deck with artifacts, it might pay to look at some other artifacts that could maybe add to some sort of synergy there. And so 2 cards that I've found are Spectrum Sentinel, which is a 1/2 artifact soldier for 1 mana, which has protection from multicolored, and whenever a non-basic land enters the battlefield, we gain a life. Now, this is the same power and toughness as our Monastery Swiftspear. Obviously, it doesn't have prowess, and prowess has been fairly effective at catching our opponents off guard with combat tricks. However, it also dies immediately to those cut downs and to the go for the throats. So we are going to cut 2 of the Swiftspears, add in our Spectrum Sentinels, and in fact, replace them with 2 copies of that. Now, we had taken out our 3-mana spell, and something I was thinking about replacing it with is Yotia Declares War. Now, this is an enchantment saga. On the first phase, you create a 0/2 colorless Thopter token with flying. On phase 2, you can tap any number of untapped artifacts, and then this saga deals that much damage to a target creature or planeswalker. And then on the third chapter, up to 1 target artifact you control becomes an artifact creature with base power and toughness 4. I think this might be the kind of removal and multi-stage value giver that we need. We like flyers. We like to rely on evasion. We like to find ways to push extra damage. This can remove something small. If we only have a Thopter on the board, by the time it gets to the second chapter, we can use that to take out a Skrelv. If we have a Swooping Lookout or a Spectrum Sentinel on the board, maybe we're looking at dealing 3 damage to something. That can take out a Thalia. That can take out a Brutal Cathar. That can open up the board for us to continue our assault. So we're going to go ahead and actually add 2 of these in. Now, the thing we're going to be replacing is going to be the Fateful Absence. And I said earlier that it's going to be hard for us to get past Esper with a damage-based strategy, removal strategy. And so we might require something like a Fateful Absence, or something that destroys a toughness 4 or more creature. I think that is just going to slow us down. It's going to take up our turn, and Esper is going to be able to replenish very quickly. So I am going to actually take out both of these copies. This way, we're looking at really relying on our evasion with Phoenix Chick and Swooping Lookout. We're relying on Yotia Declares War and the ability to make one of these Swooping Lookouts or Spectrum Sentinels a 4 power instead. And we're looking at some of our Go Face with Lightning Strike, with Play with Fire, with Kumano, and our combat tricks to kind of get us across the finish line. So this is a little bit more pared down. It's going to be a little bit easier to pilot. We're not going to have to ask ourselves as many questions. We're not going to have to try to play around as many spells. And if it works, it works. So this is the deck list that we're going to take into our continued climb through Platinum. We'll see if this can answer some of those Esper cards that we've been having trouble with. And we will see how this does come tomorrow's video. Join us as we continue our climb from MudGrub to Mythic, doing whatever we can to take our commons and uncommons deck to the top. Thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate you checking in. Please like, share, and subscribe if you have enjoyed the video, and we will see you next time.